Welcome, everyone. We'll start now. Welcome to our Gramercy Book Club discussion featuring the Ballerinas. Tonight's book club selection by author Rachel Kapelke-Dale. I'm Linda Cass, owner of Gramercy Books and author event curator. Thank you for joining us. And I want to thank BalletMet for being Gramercy's community partner for this book club program. We are live streaming through Zoom meeting, and this program will be recorded. To preview the next hour, after introductions, our moderators, Edward, Liang, and Sue Porter, will lead you in a discussion about the Ballerinas for about 30 minutes. We'll be joined by Rachel Kapelke-Dale for the following half hour. Edward and Sue will ask Rachel your questions, as well as several of their own during that latter time. And let me review a few details about the Zoom meeting platform. I'm sure many of you are very familiar with it at this point. First, on the upper right corner of your screen, you have two viewing options, speaker or gallery view. Next, if you just find the mute, unmute icon, which appears as a microphone on your screen. Right now, all of you are muted. Once I introduce our facilitators and the discussion begins, you will be able to unmute yourself when you have a comment and then mute yourself when you're finished speaking. And you will all be muted again during the Q&A portion of the program. The chat box is a handy tool, and the icon typically sits on the bottom of your screen. Clicking on this box opens a window on the right column of your screen, and it allows you to write comments. If you have a question you'd like Edward and Sue to ask Rachel during the second half of the program, please insert that question in all capital letters at any time so they can notice it. And if you'd prefer to comment on chat instead of on camera during the book discussion, you can also do so in chat. But I encourage you to talk and just unmute yourself. We're a very informal group. The chat box text will also be recorded. If you haven't done so yet, click on chat now. We're providing registration links to two remaining January programs that still have seats available. Both are at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And know that in-person programs are offered with complete safety protocols, including vaccination and mask requirements for attendees. So next Tuesday, January 18th, David Gutterson, author of Snow Falling on Cedars, and now The Final Case, shares a deeply affecting examination of justice and injustice and family love in conversation with WOSU's Christopher Purdy. This event will be live streamed through Zoom webinar. On Monday, January 31st, National Book Award winner Kevin Boyle, author of Arc of Justice, will be in conversation with Ohio State history scholar and author Hassan Jeffries to discuss the publication of Boyle's extraordinary new book, The Shattering: America in the 1960s. Tickets for this in-person event is sold out, but online tickets are still available, which will be live streamed through Zoom webinar. Click on the link for either of these programs to learn more about them or to register. You can learn about additional Gramercy Books author programs on our website and through our e-newsletter. And do sign up for the newsletter at gramercybooksbexley.com. We now have a Facebook group for Gramercy Book Club, and we'll be using it to announce upcoming book club programming. So stay tuned because we have a program in later February. And now on to tonight's program. In tonight's book club selection, The Ballerinas, author Rachel Kapelke-Dale explores the complexities of female friendship, the dark drive toward physical perfection in the name of artistic expression, and the double-edged sword of ambition and passion in her story about a trio of ballerinas who meet as students at the Paris Opera Ballet School. Rachel Kapelke-Dale is the co-author of Graduates in Wonderland, a memoir about the significance and nuances of female friendships. She's the author of Vanity Fair Hollywood's column, Advice from the Stars, and she spent years in intensive ballet training before receiving a BA from Brown University, an MA from the University of Paris, and a PhD from University College London. Rachel currently lives in Paris. And we have two fabulous experts moderating our discussion tonight. Edward Liang was named Artistic Director of BalletMet in 2013, where he continues to choreograph new works for companies, both domestically and abroad. Edwaard is a former dancer with the New York City Ballet and Netherlands Dans Theater, and has built an international reputation as a choreographer. Over the last decade, he has created works for the Bolshoi Ballet, Joffrey Ballet, New York City Ballet, San Francisco Ballet, Shanghai Ballet, and many others. Sue Porter was named BalletMet's executive director in August of 2015. She's an attorney who started her legal career in 1986 as an associate attorney and later a partner specializing in labor and employment law with Schottenstein, Zox & Dunn, now Ice Miller. In her 30 years as an attorney, she's been recognized as a leading lawyer for Business and Chambers USA, as the best lawyer in America, an Ohio super lawyer, a top 50 women lawyer in Ohio, and a top 25 women lawyer in Columbus. Welcome and thank you both for being with us, Edward and Sue. The floor is now yours.
Thank you, Linda, so much. We are so excited to be partnering with you and Gramercy Books, and we can't thank you enough for picking a book title on a subject that is near and dear to our hearts. And we're also excited to see so many familiar faces in the group that's here today. Thank you. We know that there's some people we see in the audience, people we see at our board meetings. I am going to take a minute and recognize Susan Douglas, who's our board chair and is with us tonight. So we're really excited. And we know so many of you are supporters, and it's important and why we're here within the community. And also how excited I am that Edward, who has the true dance experience here within this, and has just an amazing, this book is talks a lot about New York City and the Paris Opera, and Edward has experience with both. So we have a few minutes here and can certainly ask questions, but we want to start a conversation and hear what you want us to talk about. So with that, I'm gonna just ask a question, and just has anybody on in the club here ever experienced seeing the Paris Opera on stage or on film? Okay, not seeing too many. So what about BalletMet? Some people I know have seen BalletMet. Okay, so that's incredible. And Edward, I'm going to ask you a question, and then we'll try and get some of these others talking. And can you tell us what it's like to have gone from a dancer and become a choreographer, much as the narrator in the book did?
Before I answer your question, Sue, I just want to again thank Gramercy Books and Linda. Thank you so much for this opportunity. We both, Sue and I, have been so excited. We wrapped up Nutcracker, and we really took our time to be able to read this book and be prepared for this fabulous event. And what's wonderful is that I was very excited about Gramercy Books selecting something that is so near and dear, obviously, to my heart and Sue's as well, in our organization, BalletMet. It's very interesting where being able to read this book, I thought that I've been dedicating my life to this industry since I started ballet at age 5. And I didn't know that I could learn things within this book. I was very excited to be able to find different nuances, and I'm extremely happy to be able to meet her and ask Rachel some questions. But to finally answer Sue's question is that, it's wonderful that I can't even fathom being able to describe to you fully the experience of being able to perform at the Garnier at the Paris Opera. This was in early 2000s. I was at that time dancing with Netherlands Dance Theater. And in the book, you can see that in ballet, there's a lot of, a simpler term is camps. there's different camps. And a higher term, I would say, is different curriculums for schools, or pedagogy, which is about, if you would, put it into universities or schools, it's curriculum. It's different ways of teaching and learning the craft of dance, and the words and the nuances and timing. So I have to tell you, it was wonderful to finally be able to perform at that time in this such historic theater. If you all think back to this novel, she was talking about an extremely ornate small stage that's right behind the main stage for dancers to get ready and warm up before the performance. And I have to tell you, it is, just thinking about it gives me little shivers, because it is something that I've always aspired to be in, this presence of this energy. When you walk into the Garnier, not only as a spectator in the audience in the front, how elaborate the staircase and how beautiful the theater, and the energy and the smell of this old historic theater. But when you go backstage, it has even a bigger pulse to it. It is so powerful when you walk in backstage and you're a part of this history, where she describes it so well in this ornate gilded studio with mirrors. There is portraits of stars from the past. And I just loved being able to actually see in my mind's eye what she was describing, not only as a personal experience, but also through reading her descriptions. Something else that I just want to kind of throw in there is that I'm very excited about asking her this question for preparation in this book. She has so much detail in this novel. A little quick insight is that it is absolutely true in the different camps or different curriculums or the different stylistic nuances from each ballet company. So when she refers to this moment where I have to look back on my notes if it was, I can't remember if it was Lindsay or if it was Margot, or our main character, but she was referring to, Delphine did. Yes, absolutely. Delphine was the one who was like, well, why would you go to New York City Ballet and destroy your technique? Why would you go to this other company when Paris Opera is known for precision? And she is absolutely spot on in that, is that every company has a stylistic nuance that is their brand, their calling card. And the Paris Opera is very much about, not about splash. So to give you more examples is, they would rather, and the author was great, she even described this as well. In pirouettes, our turns, whether it's on point or on demi for men, and it's rotations while you're standing on one leg. And the Paris Opera style is about unique precision and exactment. So it's exactly precise to finish, and they would rather do 3 turns versus 7 turns and make a splash. And that is very much their style in how they look at all of their repertoire. So I loved being able to almost fall into this novel and be able to kind of soak in on some of these memories that I've had. It was great.
That's amazing. So let's get some questions from the group and have some discussion here.
Okay, I see there's a question. How would you describe the style brand for our very own fabulous BalletMet? Good question, Jessica. Thank you for that softball question. Obviously, we are very different than the Paris Opera or New York City Ballet. The Paris Opera is just by base has over 150 dancers in their rank at one season, at 1 year. And just another nuance is that there's over 20 plus character dancers, and character dancers are, whether it is retired former stars or just dancers that have decided to transition to just doing acting on stage and pantomime. And these are, if a company of over 150 has 20 dancers just doing character roles, that gives you a scope of how big this company is. What is beyond the surface of difference is that I would rather go with similarities, because that's, I think, a wonderful positive to be able to compare the Paris Opera with BalletMet. Is a wonderful, interesting thing that Sue and I are impassioned about is we have very similar goals as the Paris Opera, which is very lofty. Our passion is to bring world-class dance to Columbus, Ohio. And believe it or not, we present similar ballets and similar choreographers to the Paris Opera, whether it's Christopher Wheeldon, Justin Peck, Balanchine. Personally, I still have a goal to choreograph at the Paris Opera. So make sure you put in your vote if you do have a vote. That is, I think, a great way to link both, is that we bring world-class dance and we also span different curriculums or types of ballets. To give you an example, we're putting on Giselle, and in February, we will have 8 performances of Giselle. Paris Opera will do Giselle as well, but the difference is that they will span a whole season. So it's not a condensed number of performances. We have 7 performances at the Davidson Theater. They could possibly have 14 performances within 8 months in the Garnier, which is the theater that is so famous for the Paris Opera. But they also have different theaters that they perform in Paris. So that's a great way to be able to bring Paris Opera and BalletMet together. And I really think that is the main I would say comparison, is that we do classical ballet like Giselle or Nutcracker or Sleeping Beauty. And then we also do Balanchine, which is neoclassical and contemporary. And we span very similar to the Paris Opera. And we do very modern contemporary works like Alexander Eichmann, who is a rising star and continues. We did his Cacti. If anyone has ever seen it, it's an incredible piece that has won numerous awards around the world. So that is what I think is similar to BalletMet and Paris Opera, is our ambition and also our repertoire. So that was a fabulous question.
So Edward, let's ask, the group here, because, a lot of them have read the book. I'm interested in, because we need some questions. We want to make sure we ask Rachel the appropriate things. What struck you about the book? What was it, was it what you expected to be reading about ballet? Let's get some thought process from the group.
I was really struck. The first thing in the first couple of chapters, how I was struck, was how descriptive, and that it was interesting how she chose her characters, and it to me, it brought me in very quickly. Her descriptions for me personally, because it jumped into my memory banks of the Garnier and Paris and school and competition and the culture of ballet and how hard it really is.
So yeah, let's look and see, you know, what some of the others in the group here have thought about. You know, the book talks about ballet. Is it what you expected? It's also a lot about friendships and how they develop and last for lifetimes. What did people think as they were reading it?
I'd like to ask a question.
Okay.
I was so interested to read that that these little girls actually lived at that school, I mean, for years. And Delphine says somewhere that she wasn't the best student, and I can't remember what it was relevant to, but she doesn't remember, or she didn't really pay attention to something or other that the other girls had, which made me think that it really was a real educational curriculum. However, in, well, I guess my question is would that be the same everywhere? You talk about the different, well, curriculums, depending on the country, I guess, or maybe depending on the ballet company, because trying to make a parallel with typical, I want to say typical education, there are always choices, so that if someone isn't college material, in quotes, whatever that means, you know, there are other opportunities that are presented by guidance counselors. And so there were no opportunities, it seemed to me. I mean, that was sort of the great concern of these three girls, young women throughout, and their cadre.
Well, I think I'll just talk a little bit for just a second about what I see in our academy, and then, you know, certainly Edward had the actual experience, but, you know, it is like many sports, right, that we see, there's a lot of dedication that can come early on. And if you want to pursue it, you are all in, and you're in at a very young age, because the time that you can dance, I was interested, the book kept saying 42, right? But I think that's a long time for a dancer. But, you know, how kids will leave their home, go and live at these places, first during summers, and then for the rest of it. You know, we have academy kids here that moved to Columbus to be part of this at a very young age. And then, you know, as you say, they have to focus so hard that sometimes they will go to college later in life in order to pursue that earlier. I don't know if that starts the discussion there, but it's been very interesting to see what these kids do. And then sometimes if they decide they're not going to pursue ballet, they go on and, you know, they are doctors and computer scientists and all sorts of things. So you have to, you know, you have to be very intelligent to go through this process.
You know, I can quickly give you an idea of what I experienced, and it obviously was not very normal. I moved to New York City by myself when I was 13 years old, and back in before online high schools or learning, it was called, you know, that it was not online learning. It was just learn as you go by mail. And the School of American Ballet is the school that I entered when I went to New York City. I graduated via mail, and basically sometimes being tutored. And I graduated early because I entered New York City Ballet at 16 years old. These institutions that are with the Paris Opera or Royal Ballet, where their government subsidized and they have massive budgets, is they partner with internally to educate these young women and men. They have dormitories. The Paris Opera, I don't know what their dormitory is called, but the Royal Ballet, their dormitory is very famous. It's called White Lodge, and yes, it's a very insular world. Everything that they do, whether it is about actual academic learning, is with their classmates, of their ballet classmates. And that is one of the reasons why I think Rachel was really emphasizing in the book how insular this world is, and that they really didn't have much of a life beyond these three best friends. If that gives you a snapshot.
Yeah, Edward, I know we're getting close to when Rachel's going to come in for just a second. There was one sort of, so there is a question there, but shall we ask Rachel that question? Sarah, is that good? All right, Linda says yes. All right, so I think, Linda, we'll turn it back to you. Oops, I think you're still on mute.
Hi.
Oh, Rachel's here. Okay. Hi, welcome, Rachel, to Gramercy Book Club. What an extraordinary novel. Delphine, Lindsay, and Margot's friendship allow the reader to really experience the sacrifices and pain of professional dance. Your novel is engrossing and provocative and well-crafted, and really a thrilling read that made a wonderful book club discussion. I know there's a lot more that our two co-moderators this evening would love to ask you, and there are questions that will be coming in through the chat box for you as well, and they will ask that of you. Our co-moderators, Edward, Liang, and Sue Porter, led the earlier discussion of your novel. They're artistic director and executive director, respectively, of Columbus's acclaimed BalletMet. Their expertise in the world of professional dance provided really a rich context and important lens for the book club participants. Everyone is now muted, so Edward and Sue, you and Rachel, the floor is all yours.
Great. Hi, Rachel. I'm Edward Liang, and I can't tell you how excited I am to be able to, first read your novel, which was, I loved being able to write into it. And I've been so jazzed to ask you questions. So, and I'm going to let Sue introduce herself, and then we're going to just dive right in.
Fabulous.
Great, Rachel, thank you. Thank you for providing us with something to do as we got out of Nutcracker season and coming to come back. You know, wonderful, wonderful read, and excited to be here with you. Edward, why don't you go ahead and ask the first question?
Okay, my first question, and we talked about it with this wonderful book club and our participants this evening, is about the word pedagogy or curriculum or the styles. So my question is, I really love the detail and the nuances that you brought in to the ballet culture, but especially not even just Paris Opera Ballet or the school or New York City Ballet, but I would say in general, this world. And we also discussed about different techniques and stylistically, and you got it spot on for the Paris Opera, for instance, that it was, the approach is absolute about precision versus it being a big splash.
Mm.
So my question, finally that I can get to it, is that what was some of your research in preparation for this novel?
That is a great question, and I'm so excited to be talking with two experts in this area, of course. So, I mean, the research goes back to my own days dancing. I think one of the first ballet books that somebody ever gave me was a biography of Balanchine, who, for those of you who don't know, was the founder and director of New York City Ballet, who, as you may have discussed, had a very particular stylistic outlook that is almost the polar opposite in terms of classical ballet from Paris and Paris Opera. So I very early on had this understanding that there were different, and of course, I studied at Milwaukee Ballet School and, Ballet Wisconsin. I learned, when you're a student, you learn that the basics are the basics pretty much everywhere that you are. And in those days before YouTube, this was all very theoretical to me. But happily, when I began the research for the book, I was able to actually compare different performances of the same role, of the same variation from different companies, and look at the music and how the different choreographers use the same music. If anybody's seen more than one Nutcracker, you may already suspect there are about 1 million of them out there. And that's true for quite a few different ballets. So, when it came time to actually get the nitty-gritty details of the ballet world right, I couldn't trust my own memory. I quit dance at 15. So it's been about 20 plus years since then. So it was a lot of documentary research into, the Paris Ballet School, because by that point, when I was writing the past timeline, we were already in our first lockdown in Paris. So there was no way of getting out to the school, but, the country as a whole is obsessed with it's a nationally supported company. It's a nationally supported school. And there are many documentaries on the students at the school and the school itself. So it was a lot of, looking into these materials that already existed, reading dancers' memoirs, which are always fascinating to me. I love those. And just checking my terminology, really.
So Rachel, just to follow up on that, how did you decide that Delphine was going to be the narrator of your story?
That's really interesting because she wasn't at first. Actually, Lindsay was. As I think the American in Paris, that was the easy perspective for me to imagine. But the issue is, and Delphine says this early on, is that when you're the best at something, your world is very small. When you're an elite athlete, like an elite dancer, or an elite artist, also like an elite dancer, you're very, very focused on that craft. And it can be hard to see, I think, at least to communicate in a narrative way, the larger structures, that are at place within your world. I'm sure the professional dancers I know do think about, the structures that surround them all the time, but they have a level of knowledge that's assumed, of background knowledge, that they wouldn't necessarily explain, when discussing it. You wouldn't say, I did a plie, a bend of my legs. You wouldn't have to explain what a plie is, or you wouldn't even think to explain it necessarily, because in your world, everybody knows that. So I wanted somebody with a little more perspective. And once I started exploring that, I thought too, again, from Lindsay's perspective, in the early version, Delphine was the villain, of the piece. But the more that I wrote, the more I thought, I'm not sure that Lindsay sees her that way. And I'm certain that Delphine doesn't see herself that way. And that was much more interesting to me. I have a lot of interest in kind of the trajectory of a dancer's career, of different dancers' careers. But the idea that you'd get injured and it would be a career-ending injury, even in such a dramatic fashion as this, is sadly not uncommon. So Lindsay's story was definitely interesting to me, but less so than Delphine's as I started writing.
Oh, really interesting.
Rachel, I loved how each character, you were not intimidated in any way to explore both equally, I think, the dark and the light of each character and their choices and whether it is trying to figure out their trajectory in the future in the positive, or spanning back in their lifetime in some of the darker moments of memory. I love that. So it's a perfect segue for Susan's question in the chat. I was surprised at how much partying and drinking and smoking the dancer characters did. Isn't it hard on a dancer's physical abilities? So I'm going to let you answer that question.
Well, again, I'm going to say, that without naming names, I think I was influenced perhaps by some dancers who I have known. And again, remember that I was dancing as a teenager. But with that said, if you look at materials like Toni Bentley has a wonderful memoir called Winter Season about her time at New York City Ballet. And I think it's right at the end of Balanchine's life there that she's writing about in the early 80s. And there's a lot of smoking, there's a lot of drinking, there's a lot of drugs, there's a lot of, there's a lot of pressure. And I think this is less so now perhaps than in the 80s, but to keep your weight down. So, I think that that's some people see smoking as a tool for that. But of course, you're balancing that against the athleticism of dancing, and many dancers are strictly anti. I think it's an individual it's an individual choice for dancers. I don't know what kind of knots I'm tying myself into here, but these characters I think need outlets, and they are very physical people. And for me, their outlets were, going to be expressed physically, even these kind of much more negative tendencies. So, that was, for me, that was, primarily based on, kind of my imagining of the characters, and how they hold themselves in the world.
Well done. I'm so glad we threw that question to you. Fabulous.
Well, I thought the timeline issues were really, really interesting of how you were going back and forth and following that. Was that something that you initially thought about when you were creating the book, or how did that come to be?
That for me was something that I worked on in conjunction with my absolutely extraordinary editor. And I think it shows the kind of transformations that a really good editor can have on a manuscript, because she noticed, that there were these flashbacks. At the time, it was all in the present day narrative with flashbacks, and she noticed these flashbacks had the beginnings of an arc, so they had, I think at the beginning we had something with Dimitri and, something with Jacques. It's, not, and a few things here and there with Lindsay and Margot, but the structure was not as it was. And, discussing that with my editor, she was saying there's some real, we want to know what it's like in St. Petersburg. We want to know the moment that she decides to go to St. Petersburg. We want to know that stuff. And of course, these are things that I'd imagined, but hadn't put on the page. And once we started playing with the structure, it was really fun to see, the ways that the two storylines could play with each other and, inform each other a little bit, for a little bit of a richer text, I hope, is the hope.
Rachel, fortunately and unfortunately, how you describe some of these characters, I know them.
Uh-oh.
That's really wonderful, at least for a personal experience, to be able to find these characters so real and so nuanced. So you brought up the word arc, and my question to you is, as an artist and as a writer, what in your mind, what would be the biggest idea or feeling or thought or takeaway that you would want the readers to have once they finish this novel? And because, again, I love using the word nuance because it is. For you, I mean, obviously, as artists, as a choreographer or a painter or an actor, you're going to create something and you still keep it detailed enough, but yet you still want the reader or the audience to be able to find themselves through it. So as an author, what would you and did you want the reader to leave with and come away with?
Yeah. I think if I could sum that up in a sentence, I probably wouldn't have written a book. It's a tough question. But with that said, I think that one of the big takeaways for me from this book is a lot of readers come away and they say, God, you know, the ballet world is tough. And I go, yeah, the ballet world is really tough. It's hard mentally, it's hard emotionally, it's hard physically, you know. And in some ways, you know, my father is also a writer and taught creative writing for many years. And, you know, when the book was in its early stages, I tried to get him interested by going, it's like a sports book, you know, it's a sports book. I think for me, the bigger message that's in there is that the ballet world, as it's depicted here in this book, is a microcosm of society, of a larger society. You know, ballet exists within the world, you know, and so I think a lot of the criticisms that we can make of, again, this very rigid ballet world that I've depicted at Paris Opera apply to, you know, society in a larger sense. So, you know, I don't want to overinterpret the book, but I'll let readers apply that, you know, in whatever way is meaningful for them.
That's amazing. We did have a question, and was there a significance in having Delphine go to St. Petersburg and go to Russia as opposed to anywhere else in the world where she could have started her choreographic career?
There was. It tickled me because I grew up in the 80s and 90s when, of course, you know, Baryshnikov is just the name, you know, and sorry, my sister's dog is next to me, so I'm not trying to sitting up and turning around. So if you see a stray tail, that's what that is. And there, you know, this was on the end of, you know, this was after Nureyev had defected from the Soviet Union. This was after many dancers, you know, defected from the Soviet Union. And there was something that just tickled me about the idea of she's choosing to go to, you know, the former Soviet Union instead of come from it. You know, it's you know, I think a lot of the dancers who did defect would say things like, you know, it's for, you know, artistic freedom and to make these choices. And I think she doesn't want that at that point. She wants somebody to be making her choices for her. So there's a little bit of that interplay in her choice of St. Petersburg, or rather in my choice of St. Petersburg.
That's so interesting. We actually had another question. And this is about the dance world and some of the changes we might be seeing. You talked a lot, I think, in the book about how, especially the Paris Opera, everyone's very uniform. There's, you know, you can only be a certain size, and how that worked, and to the, you know, it was just an interesting assessment of what ballet is. But, you know, we talk about, are there changes taking place in the ballet world now? And have you seen any of that? And then Edward, maybe you can comment just a minute about, you know, are body expectations unrealistic? the competition that exists within this. So maybe Rachel, you can comment, and Edward can comment as well.
Absolutely. There's a great book by, I think her name is Chloe Argyle, that just came out called Turning Point, and I'm looking at some of the problems within the ballet world, but also some of the changes. Yeah, I think we are seeing ballet change in some ways by some companies, not necessarily at Paris Opera, although they have quite a few more people of color, for example, than they did, say, 30 years ago. It's still probably, a tenth of their company. The rest is very white, very uniform in terms of, body shape and standards. But again, this I think goes back to Edward's earlier point that Paris Opera really sees themselves as the upholders of this, traditional image. So I think if the standards for, say, their school or, the company do change, they may be late in the game, compared to, for example, some American or Asian or, other European companies. I would say, that my knowledge of ballet today isn't as, it is certainly not as encyclopedic as I'm sure Edward's is, and it's not even where it was 15 years ago. So I'm quite interested to hear his response to this.
It's a tough question, and it's a tough question that all of us, I want, and I think that not only our communities, but our industry is asking us to look at. It is very important to Sue and I. Top of the question is, has the ballet world changed? Not enough. And have we all done enough? Not enough. Have we started more conversations about it? Yes. Fortunately, is that Sue and I are impassioned in this particular topic, especially from my background. I am the only Asian Chinese artistic director of a ballet company in the United States. So that gives you a snapshot real quick. It is something that we feel strongly for BalletMet is our dancers, and our company reflects our community. Are we there yet? No, but we are, I would say, far, not better, but we're further along in the implementation and growing in talent, not only locally, and being able to bring talent and dancers of color, BIPOC dancers that really reflect the community and reflect choreographers. One of our staples is new works, and I want choreographers to be able to have as much range, not only in look, but style and body types, so that it's slowly being able to shape the identity of what dance is. I like to strip it down to what Sue and I, and what I really believe in, is dance and ballet. We've gotten so far away from the first iterations of what ballet is. And now that there's such a gray area of what ballet means or what dance means. And ballet ultimately means dance. And dance, to me, is the ultimate communicator. So if you have different tools to be able to communicate, and stories to be able to tell, different stories to tell, that's why it was great that Rachel brought into her novel something that, even ideas that still are not done, an all-female company. I mean, so do I think that we are having conversations about this? Yes. And there's even nuances for BalletMet that we are pushing other organizations like the Balanchine Trust to rethink some of their policies. to give you an example, is what if we were to do a Balanchine ballet, and this ballet called Symphony in C, which is very interesting. It was first choreographed by George Balanchine at the Paris Opera, and everybody is in pristine white tutus, and depending on the company, either white or pink tights and pink or white point shoes. And I'm in conversations, but especially for our classical ballets, is that not only do we want our dancers of color or BIPOC dancers to not just dye their tights so that they can be flesh colored. We want all our dancers to dye their tights their own particular skin tone. So there's not one dancer that is being othered and that they don't feel that they are part of this dance collective, because that's what you need. You need sisterhood and brotherhood to create something that's very powerful on stage. And these are learnings that, as an organization, we are just learning in these past 2 years of how to be better every day. So are we changing? We're trying, but sometimes trying is not always the best word.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting. And Rachel, some of the things, again, you captured within this book, just brought it home, the interactions, and maybe you can talk a little bit about how you thought about the interactions. And we have, some of our board and some people in the community who are part of this group tonight. And thinking about the interactions you had with Natalie as the artistic director and the board, and what was the control and things. Can you give us a little more insight in what you were thinking in bringing that into the book?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the idea that artistic choices are mediated by outside influences was really important to me to communicate. So in this case, I think that really comes through the figure of Natalie. So unfortunately, in some cases, the artistic director gets a little bit vilified in this book. But I have a lot of sympathy for her, because she's going, we can't have 120 sugar plum fairies. We just can't do it. This is not how this world works. And so, I think, through Natalie, and I think it's important as well to realize that Natalie she's a tough cookie, but she also does help shape Delphine in some ways, despite her mistakes, despite, I think, the kind of serious errors of judgment that she makes. I think artistically, she does, she does help Delphine in saying, this, what are you doing that's new? Why do we want to show this? We've given you carte blanche at Paris Opera Ballet, which is, practically unheard of. What are you going to do with it? Other than give me a little 19th century pastiche. And so she's pushing her. And then once she gets there, when she has the ballet with Lindsay at the end, the Joplin ballet, then she says, she gives her a little trouble, but then when she sees it, she says, you know what? Yeah, okay. This is, you got to go ahead and do this. So I think, I wanted to have these tensions that I think a choreographer feels, whether they're explicit or implicitly, directing their artistic choices. I wanted that made concrete and, in actual scenes. And poor Natalie gets the brunt of it.
Rachel, I loved Natalie as a character, and I absolutely loved. And it was, again, nuanced and deep, because it made me have a conversation with Sue about, there's this one, I guess, line that really hit me, is that, people really look at their boss or artistic director as a figurehead and not a real human. And that it really, I never really thought about it that way. It was wonderful, wonderful.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Yeah. So Rachel, we had another question, and want to hear if you could talk about how you, as the author, decided the particular piece that Delphine came back to Paris to choreograph, and how you wanted to impact the narrative with that.
Absolutely. This is another example of where having conversations with really smart people can help you make important decisions. In an early draft of this book, Delphine was actually choreographing a ballet of Harry Potter, because there is a score of Harry Potter. She's thinking, who wouldn't go see this? You know, and get everybody in, all of that. And, you know, yeah, you get the kids from the school, so you get the parents in the audience, you get, you know, get everybody, but it had no deeper meaning. So it was it's kind of a one hit joke, you know, you go, well, you know, yeah, everybody wants to make the next Harry Potter. She's literally going to do it. And then that's it. It didn't really have greater significance to her life. So, you know, my editor and I sat down, and I'd done a lot of research into the Russian imperial family for an earlier project I was working on that never really took off. But that they were still kind of living in my mind, and I wanted to use that information somehow. And I thought, what if she's doing something about, you know, the Tsarina? Because I can really see, you know, Rasputin is almost this Drosselmeyer figure. Drosselmeyer's the magician, the godfather in the Nutcracker, who brings the Nutcracker, you know, then his kind of creepy robes and all of this. And once I saw that interaction, once I saw the Rasputin Tsarina interaction, I thought this could be a ballet. And I think this would have a lot to say about, a lot to do with Delphine's life. And again, give more of a dialogue with, you know, the actual story than just it's Harry Potter.
That's so interesting. Well, I know we are drawing toward the end. Any final questions people would like to put out? Enjoy.
Well, I guess I'm going to join here, and just since it is past the hour, Rachel, this was just wonderful. An illuminating conversation, just like the book itself was an illuminating book. And I just want to thank you so much for your book, and for being with us tonight. And also, of course, Edward and Sue, you guys, you know, bringing your expertise to this conversation. We are just so thrilled that you partnered with us to do this. Thank Nikki, our streaming engineer, and all of the participants this evening in terms of the outstanding questions and comments. So thank you all. Just a final check into our chat box. You're going to find links to our remaining January available yet author programs, as well as a link to purchase the Ballerinas if you haven't already. Just to tell everyone, Gramercy Books continues to be open 7 days a week, 10 to 6, and we offer curbside pickup for everyone's convenience. And just want to thank Rachel, Edward, Sue, and all of you again for spending your evening with Gramercy Books. Thanks so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.